When a black homeowner moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood, he never imagined his biggest problem would be the HOA president, an entitled woman who believed rules didn't apply to her. But when she repeatedly parked in his private driveway, he took matters into his own hands, and the results went viral. Marcus Evans stood under the warm morning sun, hands on his hips, surveying his new home with quiet pride. The crisp white paint of the two-story colonial shimmered under the golden rays. A tire swing gently swayed from the thick oak in the front yard, promising countless afternoons of laughter for his sons. After 15 years in the Navy, followed by a decade climbing the corporate ladder in tech, Marcus had finally made it. A beautiful house in an affluent suburban neighborhood called Oak Hollow, quiet, scenic, and cloaked in a veneer of respectability. The kind of neighborhood where kids rode scooters on the sidewalks, and people posted recipes and lawn care tips on community message boards. But Marcus knew something else too. Oak Hollow didn't have many families that looked like his. He had done his homework before moving. The demographics didn't lie. This wasn't a diverse enclave. Still, he believed that hard work, character, and community spirit could bridge any gap. This house was his reward for years of sacrifice, for the all-nighters coding through software updates, for the months at sea, for all the holidays missed while deployed. He wasn't about to let anything ruin it. He was carrying the last box from the moving truck when he heard a sharp voice call out from behind him. "Excuse me." Marcus turned to see a woman striding purposefully toward him. She was in her late 50s, wearing a powder blue blouse tucked neatly into pleated khakis. Her strawberry blonde hair was curled perfectly, helmet-like against the wind. A clipboard was tucked under her arm like a weapon. "I'm Carol Whitaker," she announced, thrusting a hand out stiffly. "President of the Oak Hollow, HOA? Nice to meet you," Marcus said, shaking her hand. "I'm Marcus Evans. Just moved in with my wife, Candace, and our 2 boys. "Yes, I saw the moving truck," she replied, eyes scanning him up and down. "Welcome to the neighborhood. We do take pride in how things are run around here." "I read the welcome packet. Everything seems very organized," Marcus said, keeping his tone neutral. "That's because we have rules," Carol said, voice sharpening. "Trash cans need to be out by 7 a.m. on Thursdays, then brought in by 6 p.m. Lawn height cannot exceed 2 inches, no basketball hoops in front yards, no excessive decorations for holidays, no commercial vehicles in the driveways overnight, and no alterations to the exterior of the home without HOA approval." Marcus smiled politely. "Got it. I'm a pretty low-maintenance neighbor." Carol pursed her lips. "I hope so. We like to maintain a certain tone here in Oak Hollow." Marcus nodded slowly. "Noted." As Carol turned and walked away, clipboard tucked tightly under her arm, Marcus shook his head. He had met dozens of people like her over the years, guardians of imagined traditions, self-appointed enforcers of arbitrary order. He wasn't going to let her ruin the joy of this new chapter. But he made a mental note. Tread lightly. The first few days were uneventful. The boys adapted quickly, spending hours exploring the backyard and making forts under the trees. His wife Candace decorated the living room with her signature minimalist flair. Marcus installed security cameras on the corners of the house, out of paranoia, but because he liked to be prepared. And he'd noticed Carol walking by several times a day, slowing down as she passed, eyes lingering on his mailbox, on the grass, on the basketball hoop he'd temporarily set up for his sons. Then came the Lexus dot. It was a Thursday morning. Marcus had an early meeting with his team, so he was dressed and ready by 7:30 a.m. He stepped outside with his laptop bag slung over his shoulder and stopped cold. Parked in his driveway was a white Lexus SUV with tinted windows. His name wasn't on the title, and neither was his wife's. Confused, he looked up and down the street. Maybe a neighbor's guest had mistakenly parked in the wrong spot. As if on cue, Carol emerged from her house 2 doors down, walking briskly toward him. "Oh, that's mine," she said casually, gesturing to the SUV. "I had some groceries, and didn't want to carry them all the way. Hope you don't mind." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Well, I do. I have to leave for work." Carol frowned, as if the concept of boundaries offended her. "It's not a big deal. I'll be out in a minute, but it's my driveway," Marcus said, voice firm. "Please move your car." She rolled her eyes but turned and walked back toward the vehicle. She backed out without apology, leaving a thin trail of dust behind her. Marcus exhaled slowly. First strike. Over the next week, it happened twice more. Each time Carol left her SUV in his driveway for just a moment. Each time, Marcus confronted her politely but firmly. And each time, she acted like he was the problem, too uptight, too aggressive, too unfriendly. The 4th time, she didn't even pretend to make an excuse. She just looked at him and said, "You don't need all this space. It's not like you have 3 cars." Marcus started keeping a log. Dates, times, photos. He contacted the HOA's general email address, but received a generic auto reply. He called the number listed in the welcome packet voicemail. He attended a board meeting held over Zoom, but when he brought up the issue during open discussion, Carol muted him. "This isn't the proper forum for personal grievances," she said curtly. "You can email me directly." He had already done that twice. Candace urged him to let it go. "She's just trying to get under your skin," She said the more you respond, the more power you give her. But it wasn't just about pride. It was about respect. This was his property, his home. He had fought too long, worked too hard to let someone treat him like he didn't belong. One Sunday afternoon, Marcus pulled into his driveway after a quick grocery run and found Carol's Lexus parked there again. His sons were playing basketball in the yard, their game stifled by the giant SUV blocking their space. That was the final straw. He parked on the curb, marched up to Carol's door, and knocked. She answered with an iced tea in hand, eyebrows raised. "Can I help you move your car?" "Now?" Marcus said. Carol's expression twisted. "Excuse me? You're trespassing. Again. I've asked you nicely. I've logged every incident. If you don't move your vehicle in the next 5 minutes, I'll call a tow truck." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You're serious? You're going to tow the HOA president's car? Try me." She slammed the door. A few minutes later, the car was gone, but Marcus had already made up his mind. The next time she parked in his driveway without permission, there would be no warning. The opportunity came quicker than he expected. 2 days later, he woke to find the white Lexus parked in its usual spot. No explanation, no apology, just bold entitlement. Marcus didn't knock. He called the tow truck. The dispatcher didn't bat an eye. "Private property. Got photos." "Yeah, we'll be there in 20. By the time the tow truck arrived, Marcus had taken multiple pictures, one from each security camera angle. He stood calmly as the driver hooked the Lexus to the lift. Then Carol burst out of her house, wearing a bathrobe in fury. "What do you think you're doing?" Marcus didn't flinch. "I told you what would happen. This is private property. You've been warned. You can't tow my car. This is harassment. You're not a victim. You're a trespasser." The tow truck pulled away with her Lexus as Carol shrieked threats about lawyers and lawsuits and HOA retaliation. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Some recorded, others simply watched. No one came to Carol's defense. Marcus went back inside and made himself a cup of coffee. Let her scream. He was just getting started. For a brief moment after the tow truck disappeared down the street with Carol Whitaker's beloved Lexus in tow, Marcus Evans allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. It wasn't joy in her misfortune that made him smile. It was relief. Finally, someone had taken him seriously. For weeks, Carol had treated him like a trespasser in his own home, and now, for the first time, the rules applied to her too. But that satisfaction didn't last long. The next morning, Marcus found a bright orange violation notice stuck to his front door. The words HOA infraction screamed in bold red letters across the top, and beneath it were handwritten notes accusing him of unauthorized surveillance devices and creating a hostile environment. Apparently, his security cameras were now considered a nuisance despite the fact that nearly every house on the block had them. Marcus laughed to himself and tossed the notice on the kitchen counter. "Hostile environment," he muttered. "She created that environment the second she treated me like a problem instead of a neighbor." Candace wasn't amused. "Marcus, you know she's not going to let this go. She's going to make this ugly." "I've dealt with worse," he replied calmly, sipping his coffee. "Bullies always double down when they're called out, but I'm not backing down. Not in my own home." By the end of the week, he received 4 more notices from the HOA, each more absurd than the last. Violation number 2. Trash bins were visible from the street for more than 2 hours. Violation number 3. Lawn had patchy discoloration and inconsistent mowing patterns. Violation number 4. A basketball hoop was visible from the driveway. Violation #5. Suspicious foot traffic late at night when Marcus's brother, a paramedic working night shifts, came to visit. Marcus began collecting every notice, scanning them, logging dates, and photographing everything. He created a secure folder in the cloud, complete with security footage, times, and even screenshots of other houses violating the same rules without penalty. But the worst came the following. Saturday, Marcus stepped outside to mow the lawn and found something spray-painted in large black letters across his garage door. "Go back to where you came from." He froze. His stomach dropped. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Candace rushed out behind him and gasped. "Marcus." "Oh my God." His boys stood in the doorway, wide-eyed and silent. No one said a word. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, like everyone was watching. But no one was willing to step forward. Marcus clenched his fists. Not from fear, but from fury. "I'm calling the police," Candace said, pulling out her phone. "No," Marcus said sharply, then softened his tone. "Not yet. Let's document everything first. Take pictures, get the security footage. If we're going to do this, we're doing it right." Within an hour, Marcus had the footage. The same white Lexus parked briefly across the street. A masked figure roughly Carol's height spray painting his garage in the early morning hours, then disappearing into the shadows. It wasn't definitive. She'd worn gloves, a hoodie, and had avoided cameras where possible. But the posture, the walk, the arrogance, it was her. The police arrived shortly after Candace filed the report. They took statements, jotted down notes, but made no promises. "Without a clear face, we can't make an arrest," the officer said apologetically. "But if this escalates, let us know immediately." It was the same old song, enough to create a report. Not enough to bring justice. Marcus sat in his garage that night, watching the paint dry on the now repainted door. The silence gnawed at him more than the incident. Carol had declared war not just on his driveway, but on his very presence. And the HOA silent as always, so he changed tactics. If Carol wanted a war, Marcus would fight it legally, tactfully, and publicly. First, he reached out to his network. A friend from his military days, now a civil rights attorney, offered to represent him pro bono. Together, they reviewed the HOA bylaws, the community charter, and the deed to Marcus's property. What they found was a goldmine. Dozens of provisions Carol had violated over the years, some minor, others serious. For example, her Lexus, often parked halfway on the street, violated traffic visibility codes. She had made exterior changes to her own house, new shutters, and a deck without HOA approval. She had imposed fines on residents without formal votes from the HOA board, which was illegal in the state. Marcus's attorney helped him draft a formal complaint, addressed not just to Carol, but to the entire HOA board and the neighborhood homeowners. He also requested mediation under the Fair Housing Act, citing racial harassment and selective enforcement of HOA rules. And then, he made his move public. He posted his story and the footage of the Lexus being towed on social media with the caption, "When your HOA president believes your driveway is her personal parking spot, and then retaliates when you say no." Within days, the video had 500,000 views. News outlets picked it up. Bloggers wrote articles. A segment aired on a local TV station. Veteran homeowner faces HOA harassment and suburban dispute. Comments poured in from all over the country, many supportive, some hostile, but all adding fuel to the fire, and the neighborhood divided. Some neighbors came forward to support him quietly. One woman, an older white retiree named Sandra, baked him a pie and whispered, "We've all wanted to stand up to Carol for years, but we didn't have the guts. You're brave." Others avoided him altogether. The Mitchells, who lived across the street, stopped waving. The Taylors, who once invited his kids to their pool, canceled their daughter's birthday party with no explanation. But Marcus didn't care about their silence. He cared about his dignity and his rights. Then, on a cloudy Wednesday afternoon, it happened again. Carol's Lexus was in his driveway. He stared at it in disbelief. Had she learned nothing? Candace looked out the window, jaw dropped. Is she actually? Is she serious? "She's taunting me," Marcus said, his voice low. "Then don't give her a warning," Candace said. "Just call the truck." He did. This time, the tow truck driver arrived even faster. When he saw the Lexus, he whistled. "Didn't we tow this same car last month?" Marcus grinned. "Yep, and it's back again." They got to work. The hook latched, the wheels lifted. Carol came storming out just as the truck started backing out. "Stop. Stop right now." The driver didn't even blink. Carol lunged toward the truck, shrieking, "You can't do this. I'll sue you. I'll sue him. I'll sue this whole neighborhood." Marcus stepped forward, calm and composed. "You've trespassed. Again, you vandalized my home. I've documented everything. And this time, I have witnesses." Neighbors had gathered. Phones were out. A young couple from the next cul-de-sac stood filming from their front lawn. One of them shouted, "Go Marcus!" And a few others clapped. Carol's face turned purple. "I am the HOA. No, Carol," Marcus said. "You're a resident, just like everyone else. And the rules apply to you too." The Lexus disappeared into the distance. Marcus stood taller than ever before, and Carol stood alone. The second tow was the breaking point. Carol Whitaker was no longer just the self-important HOA president harassing one neighbor. She had become a national spectacle. Within 24 hours of the second video going viral, hashtags like #DrivewayJustice and #KarenVestVeteran were trending. Major outlets picked up the story. CNN requested an interview. Talk shows debated homeowner rights. And through it all, Marcus Evans stayed calm, strategic, and prepared. He hadn't asked for this attention. He just wanted to be left alone, to enjoy the home he worked so hard for. But now that the world was watching, he saw an opportunity not just to defend himself, but to dismantle a culture of silent discrimination that lived behind manicured lawns and HOA newsletters. Carol, meanwhile, was unraveling. She stormed into the next HOA meeting, held in the community clubhouse, flanked by two allies from her inner circle, both longtime residents, both visibly uncomfortable by the swirling controversy. The room was packed. For the first time, people actually showed up, standing room only. Some were angry, others curious. Everyone wanted to hear what would happen next. Marcus sat in the front row, arms crossed, flanked by Candace, and their two sons. Carol cleared her throat, standing at the front like she was addressing a third-grade classroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today because a certain resident has chosen to turn a private disagreement into a media circus." Groans rippled through the crowd. "I have always acted in the best interest of Ocala," she continued, "and I will not be bullied or slandered by people who don't understand how this community operates." Someone from the back shouted, "You're not the victim here, Carol." Another yelled, "You brought this on yourself." Carol's cheeks flushed. "Order. I will have order." But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. The air had shifted. The residents had watched the footage, read the HOA bylaws, seen the vandalism photos. Some were embarrassed to have supported her for so long. Others were afraid they'd be her next target. Then Marcus stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't wave papers or point fingers. He simply walked to the front of the room, turned to face the neighbors, and spoke. My name is Marcus Evans. I'm a husband, a father, a Navy veteran, and a proud homeowner in Oak Hollow. I came here to raise my children in peace and safety. I didn't ask for conflict. I didn't ask to be targeted. But when someone repeatedly violated my rights, disrespected my property, and weaponized authority against me, I stood up. And I'll keep standing up not just for me, but for anyone who's ever been intimidated into silence. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I have documented every incident. I've submitted a formal complaint under the Fair Housing Act, and if this board continues to operate under the influence of someone who abuses their power, I will pursue legal action. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Silence, then applause. It started slowly, just a few people, then more and more, until the entire room was clapping. Carol's jaw tightened. She looked like she might scream. Instead, she gathered her papers and sat down. The HOA attorney called in after the media fallout stepped forward. We have reviewed the documents submitted by Mr. Evans and have launched an internal audit of all enforcement actions taken under this board's leadership over the last 24 months, effective immediately. The board is suspending President Whitaker's authority pending the outcome of that investigation. Carol's eyes bulged. You can't do this? I am the board. No, ma'am, the attorney said coolly. We're the board. Until now. The room erupted again. This time, in cheers. Marcus didn't smile. He simply nodded and sat back down beside his family. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Carol's influence vanished almost overnight. The HOA elected a new interim board, made up of longtime residents who had grown weary of her reign. They promised transparency, fairness, and an end to arbitrary enforcement. Marcus was even invited to help rewrite parts of the HOA guidelines, to make sure no one else could be targeted the way he was. But the most unexpected change came from the community itself. Neighbors began dropping off casseroles, baked goods, handwritten letters. One retired Army colonel brought Marcus a bottle of whiskey and said, "You reminded me why we fight for this country." The woman who lived across the street, who had avoided eye contact for weeks, came over in tears. I let her bully me for years, she said. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Marcus didn't hold grudges. He wasn't interested in revenge. He was interested in justice. Carol, meanwhile, retreated into her home. Her Lexus sat idle in her driveway, now the subject of neighborhood gossip. Eventually, she put her house up for sale. Rumor had it she was moving to another gated community. 2 towns over, some whispered she was forced out, others said she couldn't stand being ignored. Either way, she was gone by spring. One morning, as Marcus was sipping coffee on his porch, a moving truck backed into Carol's driveway. She came out briefly, supervising the last of her furniture being loaded. Marcus watched quietly from across the street. He wasn't gloating. He felt something closer to relief. She looked over once. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. She turned away. 6 months later, Oak Hollow looked different, not in its buildings or its lawns, but in its soul. The new HOA board held monthly meetings that were actually attended. Rules were applied, fairly, without favoritism. Cultural celebrations appeared on front lawns, flags, wreaths, colorful lights, without passive-aggressive warnings or citations. People waved more, talked more, helped more. Marcus organized a block party, complete with food trucks, live music, and games for the kids. It was the biggest event the neighborhood had ever seen. And as dusk settled and the sun dipped below the trees, Marcus stood in the driveway that once symbolized conflict and watched his boys laugh and play under the twinkling lights. Candace joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You changed this place, she said. We changed it, Marcus replied. Together, she smiled. A lot of people would have given up, moved away. He looked at her, then out at the street. I didn't fight wars just to run from a driveway. They laughed. She kissed his cheek. A neighbor walked by with a plate of ribs. Hey Marcus, he said. You're the reason this place feels like home now. Marcus smiled humbly. Appreciate that. And as the music played and children danced in the cul-de-sac, Marcus Evans stood in the driveway he had fought to protect, no longer just a patch of concrete, but a symbol of respect, resilience, and the refusal to be pushed aside. He had claimed his place, and no one would take it from him again.